In the aftermath of World War II, a new kind of conflict emerged. It was not fought with guns and tanks on the battlefield, but with ideology, diplomacy, and influence. This was the Cold War, a battle of superpowers that spanned nearly half a century and shaped the modern world. From the ruins of Berlin to the jungles of Vietnam, from the race to the moon to the shadow of nuclear annihilation, the Cold War would become one of the most defining chapters in human history. The roots of the Cold War were planted during the closing days of World War II. The Allies, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom, had joined forces to defeat Nazi Germany. But as victory drew closer, cracks began to emerge in their alliance. The West, led by the United States, championed democracy and capitalism. The Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, sought to expand its communist ideology. The division of Germany into East and West, with Berlin split into 4 occupation zones, became a symbol of the growing rift. By 1947, the Truman Doctrine had made it clear the United States would oppose the spread of communism, signaling the beginning of a geopolitical rivalry that would engulf the world. Winston Churchill famously described the situation in 1946. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind this iron curtain, Eastern Europe fell under Soviet control. In response, the United States adopted a policy of containment, aiming to prevent communism's spread. The Marshall Plan, launched in 1948, provided billions of dollars to rebuild war-torn Europe. This economic aid not only fostered recovery, but also strengthened alliances against Soviet influence. One of the first major crises of the Cold War came in 1948. The Soviet Union blocked all access to West Berlin, hoping to force the Allies out of the city. In response, the United States and its allies launched the Berlin Airlift, delivering food, fuel, and supplies to the isolated city by air. For nearly a year, planes landed every few minutes, a powerful demonstration of Western resolve. By May 1949, the blockade was lifted, but the division of Berlin and of Germany itself was now firmly entrenched. As the Cold War deepened, an arms race of unprecedented scale unfolded. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb, breaking the United States' monopoly on nuclear weapons. The stakes grew higher with the development of the hydrogen bomb and the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Both superpowers amassed vast arsenals, enough to destroy the world many times over. Yet paradoxically, it was this very balance of terror that prevented direct conflict. The Cold War was rarely fought directly. Instead, it played out in proxy wars across the globe. In Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and beyond, the superpowers backed opposing sides, turning local conflicts into global struggles. The Korean War of the early 1950s ended in stalemate, with the peninsula divided at the 38th parallel. In Vietnam, decades of fighting culminated in a communist victory in 1975. And in Afghanistan, Soviet forces became bogged down in a costly, decade-long conflict that some have called the Soviet Union's Vietnam. While battles raged on Earth, the Cold War also reached the stars. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, into orbit. The space race had begun. The United States responded with a series of bold initiatives, culminating in the Apollo 11 mission that landed humans on the moon in 1969. The space race was as much about technological prowess as it was about ideological supremacy. In October 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. The Cuban Missile Crisis erupted when American reconnaissance planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. For 13 tense days, the world held its breath. Ultimately, a deal was reached. The Soviet Union would remove its missiles from Cuba in exchange for a U.S. pledge not to invade the island. A secret agreement also led to the removal of American missiles from Turkey. The 1970s saw a period of détente, or relaxation of tensions. Treaties like SALT won limited nuclear arms, and leaders engaged in high-profile summits. But this fragile peace was short-lived. By the 1980s, the Cold War entered its final phase, with Ronald Reagan's hardline policies and the Soviet Union's internal struggles pushing the conflict toward resolution. The Cold War began to unravel in the late 1980s. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms like glasnost and perestroika, aiming to modernize the USSR. But these changes also exposed deep economic and political weaknesses. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, a powerful symbol of the Cold War's end. By 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, marking the conclusion of this epic struggle. The Cold War was a battle of ideologies, a clash of superpowers, and a race for global dominance. Its legacy can still be felt today in alliances like NATO, in the politics of former Cold War nations, and in the lingering threat of nuclear weapons. But it also stands as a testament to the resilience of humanity, that even in the face of existential threats, cooler heads can prevail.